What is going on, everybody? My name is Kneeckoh and welcome back to another Pokemon Scarlet and Violet video. Today I'm finally going to be talking about team building in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I made a video a while back breaking down how to get into competitive Pokemon if you're starting in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and I said in that video that I'd be making a team building video, but personally, I needed to grow as a team builder and as a player before I felt super comfortable making this video. And today I'm going to break down a bunch of different things that really will help you get into it and get into the ideas behind team building in Pokemon, because it's a very complicated game and it's something that can be very frustrating. But I want to break this down on a very simple level and also talk on some more deep ideas throughout the course of this. So if this is your first time here on the channel, make sure you are subscribed for more videos like this in the future, and check out the Discord where people over there playing Pokemon all the time. But let's get into it. So the first thing I want to start on is that this video is, yes, very much for beginners in Pokemon, trying to get into competitive, trying to understand how to build teams more effectively so they can start competing at a higher level in the game. I will not sit here and say that I'm the best team builder out there for Pokemon. I sit there and I work over and over and over on a team, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. That's just Pokemon, right? I have other people help me refine teams, whether it be my friend group or my VGC coach, a bunch of different things, right? So I am not going to sit here and pretend like I am the all-knowing being out there, but I have some tips for people to get in. And if you want to get into competitive Pokemon, if this is like your starting point, I would recommend understanding the base game of competitive Pokemon first. I have a separate video talking about exactly that. It goes into every minute detail that you could possibly need for getting into competitive Pokemon. I highly recommend checking out that video first and then coming back over to this video. But after you understand the basics of competitive Pokemon and how to get into it, next, I would recommend starting to try to understand the metagame, because this is very important to know what Pokemon are popular, how they're being used, why they're being used, so that way you can build teams around those Pokemon to start countering them. The best website for this is Pikalytics, in my opinion. You're able to go in and pick whatever format for whatever type of Pokemon that you're playing. Obviously, I focus on VGC, so I'm in VGC Series 2 right now, but every type of format has a list here, whether it be singles, OU, you know, whatever the case may be. This is an excellent resource for you guys to start using, and it breaks down the Pokemon that are super popular right now. For example, this is the Showdown ladder. Fluttermane's up there, Iron Hands is up there, and if you click each of these Pokemon, it'll show you the top moves that are being used on that particular Pokemon. It'll show you the top items. The only thing I believe that this does not cover is top Terra types. That is something you'll have to kind of watch other gameplay to kind of figure out and look at tournament results, things like that, to see what's going on. But yeah, if you look, you can see, you know, natures and EV spreads and things of that nature, teammates that are best for those Pokemon. So that way you can go in, see what's popular, see what works together. And this not only helps you understand the metagame more effectively, but it also helps you kind of start brainstorming ideas and understanding what you might possibly want to build a team around. Now I want to kind of get into actual team building and talk about ideas, whether it be, you know, original ideas versus borrowing ideas from other players, right? Because a lot of people kind of don't want to feel like they're just copying another player. But the thing about Pokemon is that the way you build a team and the way that you play a team is so different from another player that you can take heavy inspiration from another team and kind of tweak it just slightly to make it your own. Or alternatively, you could just use rental codes and go in and start playing with other people's teams. And this is something I really recommend for newer players, is taking rental codes of teams that work and then playing the game, understanding why those teams work, and then that allows you to have the game knowledge to understand what changes you could make to make the team your own and make it better. So for example, a team that was super popular at the very start of Series 1 was a team very similar to this, featuring Mousehold, Murkrow, Goldango, Garchomp, Hydreigon, and it was Annihilape. I tweaked the team. I'm running Scarlet on this team. I featured this team on the channel before. Originally, this was an Annihilape that was very, very popular at the start of the series, but I just haven't been a huge fan of using Annihilape myself personally, so I wanted to find another alternative that would fit very well onto the team, and I landed on Scarlet. Why did I land on Scarlet? Because it pairs so well with Goldango. It still fit the ghost typing that I was looking for, you know, Annihilape. Annihilape filled that role, also filled the fighting type role, and Scarlet actually had access to close combat as well as Shadow Sneak. So I filled those two typing roles without having to sacrifice, you know, changing the type of the Pokemon by removing Annihilate, right? But it also paired very well with things like Goldango that I had on the team. Goldango doesn't like fire types. I'm able to rotate this in with Flash Fire and not take any damage on that slot. So it's a really fun variation of the team that I ended up running with a Water Terra typing, running Terra Blast as well, and Assault Vest. Was a super fun variation. So I took an idea that somebody else had and tweaked it to make it my own, and this is actually the first team that I got to Master Ball with in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. But if you wanted to build a team with your own ideas, I would really start with just a general concept. Start brainstorming what you'd like to have a team be centered around, so that way you could then go in and start building a team. And honestly, in terms of having an idea, I would recommend starting with either one Pokemon or two Pokemon for your idea. That's just kind of how my brain works. Whether it be like a common strategy, something like Armarouge and Aditi, like that's a very solid idea on where you want to start for the team. There you go. There's a combo right there. But if you just wanted to focus on one Pokemon, that works as well. For example, I really like Great Tusk, and I have a lot of teams built around Great Tusk in Series 2. And that's where I start my building process is, okay, what pairs well with Great Tusk? What works around this Pokemon? So that way I can start building an effective team to feature my idea, what I want to use. And I feel like this leads really well into the next section, which is cores. Cores are a really basic idea that really help people build more consistent teams in Pokemon. And a core is something that is basically a grouping of Pokemon that have type advantages over one another, so that way you can rotate more effectively in battle. A big example of a core would be a Grass Fire Water core. Very simple. It's the starter trio. All of these are effective against one another, but you know, they resist the others. So you're able to switch them in effectively into those slots and be able to take hits for one another. So right now, just a super common core in Series 2. Arcanine, Amoonguss, or Brute Bonnet. Brute Bonnet's seen a lot of use as well. And then something like Bundle, or maybe even Dondozo, right? There you go. There's your core. Fire, grass, water. You're able to rotate these Pokemon around to take hits. So obviously Arcanine doesn't like water type. You rotate in Dondozo. Dondozo eats that hit. Dondozo doesn't like grass type. You rotate in Amoonguss. Amoonguss eats that hit, right? So there's the general concept is that you have Pokemon that are strong against the weaknesses of the other Pokemon. Another very common type of core is the Dragon Fairy Steel core, which is called the Fantasy core. So something like that would be like Sylveon. You could run Goldango or Kingambit. And then you could run, I don't know, you could run Dragonite or Roaring Moon, right? Just so you have Pokemon that can switch in and take hits for the other. So for example, you know, Sylveon doesn't like steel type attacks. You switch in Goldango, Goldango eats that. You switch in Kingambit, Kingambit eats that. Dragon types don't like fairy types. You're able to rotate in Sylveon and it completely ignores the dragon type attack, right? So there's that variable of having Pokemon that take each other's weaknesses and eat them up. And this is just a really solid base for getting into how to build around certain Pokemon, how to start prepping a team very early on. And then after you have your core, so let's say you're running something like this, right? We're going to run this. After you have this, you start filling in the gaps with other weaknesses and other variables that you would need for this particular team. So for example, we don't have like a water type, something that could handle, you know, even a fire type. So, you know, adding like an iron bundle to this would be good because we cover, you know, this doesn't like ice types, this doesn't like dragon types. Bundle covers both of those. Goldango doesn't like fire types. Bundle covers that. Great Tusk doesn't like water or grass types. Bundle can take care of both of those. So that's how you finish out the team after you kind of get an idea of your core that you're going to be using. And that leads us pretty perfectly into the next segment, which is now modes. We had cores, which is like the structural build of a team, and then you have modes. So for example, on this team, I have my fantasy core. I have my Dragon Excalibur, I have my Fairy Tinkaton, and I have my Steel Goldango, right? Very solid core for this particular setup, and this team was one of the best teams that I used in Series 1 that I had built personally. I took some ideas from other teams, and I built a strong foundation, and this was actually a couple versions deep into this team. I had built an earlier version of this team that I didn't like, and then I started taking some ideas from other teams that I'd seen and just started piecing something together. And modes are ways that a team functions together to promote a strategy, right? So for example, for this team, I don't have a Murkrow, which was super common for, you know, boosting Goldango. That was a really common mode that you saw in Series 1, because Murkrow could go out, it would Prankster Tailwind, that would make Goldango very fast, and then you're able to go in and start dropping Make It Rains left, right, and center. I don't have that Murkrow, but the first mode that I had for this team was my Tatsugiri with a Choice Scarf, because Tatsugiri with Choice Scarf was outspeeding most Pokemon in the format, and I was able to go in with my Tatsugiri, Icy Wind, lower the speed on every other Pokemon out there, and then start dropping Make It Rains. Super, super solid option for making this just a really strong combo. The other mode, especially if I was going into something that could potentially be, you know, like a Trick Room setup, maybe like Farigiraf Hariyama, that was super common in Series 1, Tinkaton. Tinkaton with Goldango was a very solid combo, because what you could do to a Farigiraf Hariyama scenario was I would able to go out and fake out the Hariyama and not have to worry about that Pokemon any longer. And then I could go in and Terra Steel, Make It Rain into the Farigiraf and the Hariyama. That would do huge damage, and I would be able to, even if they still survived and got the Trick Room off, I would be able to cover the rest of that, because 2 Pokemon are super low. So I'd be able to clean up the rest of the game by having some of my slower Pokemon in the back, because already there was so much damage done. So there was a couple different modes. Also, Tinkaton and Goldango just pair very nicely together anyways, because of Mold Breaker and Helping Hand. You're able to ignore the Good as Gold effect and just use Helping Hand on Goldango to make those Make It Rains even stronger. So those are just a couple of the modes that are usable on this team. And that's something you got to think about as your team building, is how are these Pokemon pairing together to effectively create a strategy that is going to win me more battles. So now I want to get into actually building a team. Building a team is super, super difficult. It is something that takes so much practice to really get into and understand. And it's something that just over time you will get better at. Like if you look at this team in Series 1, this was just not a very good team, right? It had some good ideas on the Pokemon that I wanted to use. Like this Garganacl, obviously. Garganacl was super, super popular. This was before just the stall Garganacl was very popular. There's just some solid ideas, but this team just wasn't hitting the way it should, and there was a lot of missing links in this team. So the big thing right now was speed control on this team that I struggled with. So I started with Tinkaton. I really wanted to use Tinkaton on a team. I think it's just a really fun Pokemon. It's my favorite support Pokemon to use, and I started with an Assault Vest set on Tinkaton with Fake Out, Rock Tomb, Knockoff, and Gigaton Hammer. And the objective was to use Rock Tomb a bunch of times and be able to lower the speed of the opposing Pokemon, kind of like you would with Icy Wind, just to kind of give my other Pokemon an advantage. The issue was that there was no other speed control outside of Tinkaton here, right? There was nothing that was helping Tinkaton to be faster than other Pokemon and slow them down. So it really wasn't working out. Then I had like Garganacl for body press shenanigans with Iron Defense, Rotom for Will-O-Wisp and Nasty Plot stuff. Skeledirge was great into Dondozo, and it still is great into Dondozo because of Unaware and Grass Terra typing. You just kind of wall Dondozos, and you can hit it through its substitutes with Torch Song, which is really nice. King Gambit was just a really solid pick all around. It played into so many different Pokemon in Series 1. And it's still seen some use Series 2, just not as much. But it's just a super solid Pokemon, so I threw that on there for definitely some counters here. For example, we had Sylveon, I can rotate that into there. If we had like a Dark type attack or a Ghost type attack coming into Skeledirge, I could rotate in King Gambit for that. And it had Safety Goggles to deal with like a Moongus. Finally, we had Sylveon, which is just a really fun Pokemon to use. Super solid. I made a video talking about it the other day. Just a really good Pokemon all around. So this was the original version of the team, and while I had some success with it, it wasn't as consistent as I wanted it to be. And so this is something that I struggled with a lot when I started playing competitive Pokemon, where if a team wasn't good or if it had issues, I would just scrap the whole team instead of trying to make the team better, which is something that I've gotten a lot better at as I've been playing Pokemon. So this is the second variation of that team. I had issues with speed control, so I dropped some of the other Pokemon. Obviously, I picked up Excalibur, got rid of Sylveon, picked up Excalibur. Now I have a fairly solid core because I added Goldango as well. I added the Murkrow Goldango for just some really fun shenanigans, right? It was super solid, super good combo, and then it paired very well with Tinkaton's Mold Breaker. So I was like, why don't I add this core? And then there's a couple different moves that I can enable with the different modes this team has. I kept Skeledirge and I kept Garganacl because I really like those Pokemon as well, and I wanted them to fit onto the team. And it was just a really solid step in the right direction for this team. It still was having some issues here and there, but the speed control was getting a lot better because Tailwind was able to set up Goldango, and I also had access to Thunder Wave, which could slow down a lot of different Pokemon. So there was definitely some solid improvement here. But ultimately, this team had issues still because I didn't really have a great time with Garganacl. Garganacl was really struggling for me because I didn't have the right Pokemon to support its stall mechanic with Salt Cure, and I was playing more around Body Press, which just wasn't getting enough done for me at the time. So then I made a third version of this team, and here is the final variation, the one we talked about earlier, featuring Dondozo and Tatsugiri. So we dropped the Murkrow altogether. We didn't really need it anymore because we had answers for Dondozo and Tatsugiri, being that we had Skeledirge and Goldango with Thunderbolt. We had some answers for Dondozo without necessarily having to have Haze on the team, which was nice. And then I figured I would have a strong water type Pokemon on the team, and I landed on Dondozo and wanted to use a Dondozo team, and this just really worked out with the Choice Scarf and the Icy Wind. And now my speed control lied on the hands of Icy Wind from Tatsugiri, Thunder Wave from Tinkaton, and then when I actually went into the commander mode with Dondozo, I had Order Up with Stretchy Tatsugiri to speed up my Dondozo. So that is how I was managing my speed as time went on, and that is something that's super important. Notice though, there are 3 versions of this team, and one just was better than all the others. This is something that's so common, is you can take an idea that you had for a team and make some heavy changes in order to make the team better. So with this team, I was like, okay, speed is my issue. Let's swap some stuff out. Kingambit went to Goldango. We got rid of a couple other things. Rotom was taken off just so we could fit in a Murkrow. And then we had Sylveon offer back Excalibur. I would recommend making smaller changes than this. I don't have the other versions of these teams anymore to show like the minuscule changes as time went on. But like smaller changes first, change some moves around, change some items around, check that first, change maybe EV spreads, then start thinking about, okay, this Pokemon just isn't doing what I needed to, switch the Pokemon around. But then I was looking at this team and I was still having issues. Garganacl just wasn't being broad enough. It wasn't doing what I needed it to for the team. So that went, Murkrow wasn't doing a whole lot outside of speeding things up and taking away the effects of Dondozo. So I just really was like, I could replace that. I switched it to a Dondozo, and that was just a really solid build all around. This team had so much success for me in Series 1. So refining a team is super important as well, is understanding that you might have an idea there with a team and you're able to build upon that. A couple smaller things I just briefly want to touch on before we close out this video. We talked about cores, we talked about modes and ways that you can start piecing Pokemon together to build a team. But I want to talk about just a couple other things. For one, speed control. This is something that's super tough for a lot of new players, is you need to focus on how you're going to make your Pokemon attack first. Whether that's going to be through Icy Wind mechanics, you know, with Bundle being so popular, you're able to use Icy Wind, slow stuff down. That's a great option. Or you're able to use Roaring Moon. That's super popular right now. Roaring Moon with Photosynthesis. You're maxing out its speed. You're giving it the booster energy. This makes it faster and everything right now. And then you give it Tailwind. Solid option. There's your option to speed things up. Talonflame is seeing a ton of use right now, right? Because Gale Wings gives priority when the Pokemon's at full health. So you're able to get Tailwind off turn 1. No problem at all. Throw a Covert Cloak on it to avoid fake outs. There you go. Right? So you're trying to figure out ways that you're able to make your Pokemon go first. Farigiraf is one. For if you don't want to go fast, you want to go slow, Trick Room. Trick Room makes your slow Pokemon attack first. So there's a bunch of different ways. Also, this works great if maybe you don't really want to focus on slow Pokemon, but you don't have a great option into dealing with faster Pokemon. Maybe there's like you have a bundle and a Farigiraf on a team, right? And there's a Tailwind setter on the other team. You could throw out Farigiraf and just set Trick Room, and if they use Tailwind, you're automatically slower, right? So you're able to move first. Just a couple things to think about. That's super important. Also, like my Tinkaton that I used earlier, Thunder Waves. Thunder Waves slows the Pokemon down dramatically when they're paralyzed. So you're able to use that as a form of speed control. Bunch of different things because you want your Pokemon to go first. The last thing I want to talk about very quickly is EVs. This is something that's super complicated for people when they're getting into team building. And EVs can be very complicated. Like, for example, if you look at this, My Skeledirge, it's built, you know, for being bulky. I'm able to take some hits. I have some points in health. I have some points in defense, special defense. You can run a bunch of different calcs to get a great EV spread like this to figure out what you need to take from certain Pokemon. Or you can opt for the 252 spreads, right? And a lot of people are like scared of straying away from the 252 spreads because it's so easy to do. However, if you look at something like this Excalibur, 244, 252, with just a couple points here and there, this is a super simple spread with minimal changes from the 252 formula, and it has so much success. So don't think that you have to start building crazy EV spreads like this in order to perform. You can still perform at a very high level with just basic spreads like this. And if you do need a more complicated spread, there's tons of content creators out there. Go watch some videos and take some spreads from them. This is not my spread for Tinkaton or Skeledirge. I pulled both of these from Moxie Boosted. He makes great EV spreads for Pokemon, and it works out great for my teams. So don't be scared to go out there and look for different stuff, but also don't be afraid to stay with a simple spread. 4 out of the 6 Pokemon on this team have very simple EV spreads, very simple spreads. So don't be afraid to stay with that, because some Pokemon will just thrive that way. So that is going to be it for this video. I know there was a lot of information here, and I'm going to chop it up and try and break it down as best I can for you guys and make it as clear as I can in the editing process. But if at any point you found this video entertaining and helpful, please leave a like and subscribe. We are trying to hit the goal of 5,000 subs by July this year. Also, be sure to check out the Discord with people over there playing Pokemon all the time. And if you want to see more from me, check out this video where I hit the ladder with a Fluttermane Parish Song team. Very fun team I had a lot of success with. It's not Wolfie's team, so don't worry about that, but it's really, really solid. I really enjoyed it. And also check out this video where I talk about Sylveon in Series 2 and why I think Sylveon is so good in Series 2. But until next time, peace.